Welcome to Higher Learning. I am your host, Oz Rashid. This is more than just a podcast. It's a front row seat to how elite leaders build the most iconic of teams. The kind of leaders who spot potential that others overlook, who build cultures people don't want to leave, who set the bar, then raise it. Work and how we work is evolving at a rapid pace like no time in history. Our guests will give you insights on how to stay out in front when it comes to all things talent, leadership, management, artificial intelligence, and developing the skills that actually matter. Whether you're a founder, hiring manager, or just obsessed with building teams the right way, this is your spot. If it's your first time here, welcome. Hit that subscribe button, drop a rating, tell a friend who gets it. To our longtime listeners, we appreciate you. Thanks for the continued support. Now, let's get into it. Today, we have a very special guest. We are joined by Ozge Erturk, the Chief Marketing Officer at FloSports, a company redefining how fans experience the sports the big networks often overlook. Before leading the charge at Flo, Ozge built a powerhouse career at global brands like Amazon, Match.com, and Varsity Tutors, mastering the art and science of growth marketing across tech, media, and e-commerce. Her path into marketing was anything but traditional. She started in engineering, earned her master's in Milan, and brought that analytical edge into every role since. In our conversation, we're going to talk about how she first got into marketing, what drew her to FloSports, and how that engineering background gives her a perspective most marketers don't have. Ozge, how you doing?
I'm good. Thank you so much for having me today.
I'm so excited to have a great conversation with you. I've been interested in FloSport for such a long time, so I can't wait to dive in and learn a little bit more about you and the organization. You're based in Austin, correct?
Correct. Yes. I moved here for the role, and ever since I've been loving it.
What a great sports community. What a great food community. What a great tech community out there. I mean, it's such a great place to live.
No complaints so far. And the quality of life obviously improved tremendously after moving from Seattle. I still miss the greenery and the community that I had, but Austin has been amazing so far.
Oh, man. Our Seattle listeners just cringed when they heard that. But you know what? The Northwest freeze up there. So I know about that. And it's like so far to get anywhere. Seattle's a beautiful city, especially in the summer. But my God, getting anywhere to a flight to San Francisco, to Texas is just, it's a long trip. So certainly Austin's a bit more central from that perspective. That's for sure.
Yes. That said, Austin is not great to get to places when compared to Dallas or Houston from a Texas community perspective. But still, I would say the quality of life from a weather perspective, and this summer has been gorgeous in Austin. It normally gets too hot. We didn't experience that this year, so no complaints really.
Okay, this show's brought to you by the Austin Chamber of Commerce. No, I'm kidding. I appreciate that. So listen, let's jump right into it. I want to talk about it. You are the Chief Marketing Officer at FloSports, but you've had, like we talked about in the intro, a bit of an atypical route getting into marketing. So let's start there. How did you first get into marketing?
So as you mentioned, I studied engineering for my undergrad, and then I did a Master of Science that was specific to engineering grads who wanted to continue their career path either in marketing or finance, make that transition at a technical university in Milan. So it's definitely been untraditional. I will just say this is really a product of where I wanted to lean into my analytical skill set. Back in Turkey, when you are choosing your degree, it's often required to do that ahead of getting into college. They don't give you a lot of room to explore. So that really fed into it originally. And from there on, as I started exploring while I was in college, I've done a series of internships throughout my time in college that led me to L'Oreal Turkey at the time. And I was in the luxury products department at the time. And I recognized I started becoming people's go-to person when they needed an analysis. And that was kind of like a light bulb moment because I was debating a lot of like what I wanted to do. I definitely wanted to lean into my strengths where people could rely on me for things that they couldn't do. And I felt like building on top of it with the master's degree, performance marketing is really how I originally got into marketing as well. So my undergrad, it was industrial engineering, which is all about how do you get this done with the least amount of time, least amount of cost, directly translates to performance marketing as well. So I felt like performance marketing was a natural fit to what I wanted to do, which then led into a much broader role as it included lifecycle marketing, product marketing, and everything that comes with that. So that was kind of like the segue, but it definitely did not happen overnight. I just essentially found myself as I kept leaning on to my strengths in different functions of marketing.
I love that. And so listen, most like career paths are not linear. They end up being circuitous and going different routes. In fact, we actually train our recruitment team to look for people that have switched functions and have maybe some cross-functional knowledge and experience because as we're going to talk about in a little bit, that perspective that brings a different outlook that can lead to a lot of really, really amazing outputs over the long term. The other thing that really stood out to me about what you just said is you were talking about kind of the Turkish university system or schooling system and then how you go one way and you're not really well prepared in terms of finding out what you want to do. And honestly, that was my experience here in the US. I mean, I went to the University of Arizona. When I first got to school, I think I had one major, then I switched to another, then I switched to another. I ended up thinking I wanted to go to law school. I started my career in technology, and I've been fortunate that I've been able to have some success on the entrepreneurial side. But it certainly wasn't because that was, my college path or that was kind of the route that I had chosen when I was 18 and went away to school. So there's some commonality there, but ultimately we end up moving towards, what we're passionate at or what we love doing. And it seems like that's for you for marketing. Let's talk about, you've worked at some different companies and some really large ones, of course, but I'm interested about FloSports because obviously there must have been something that drew you there to pick up and move from where you were living in Seattle to go to Austin. So what is it about the brand in this company that excited you and made this the place to be?
Yeah, for sure. It definitely wasn't a decision I took lightly, especially with a kid moving from a city to another where you do not know anyone. And, leaving a community behind was definitely not an easy decision. I would say the biggest driver in my decision is um, how Flow is really filling in a huge gap. We do cover over 25 different sports, and these are sports, to your earlier point, that has often been left behind by the traditional media. The product market fit was so uncanny, so obvious for me. And I felt like there was a huge market to build on top of. Flow Sports has been in this market for now, we're going to hit our 20th year next year, has been
Wow.
for a while. But I recognize that at the moment that, I got the call, this was 3.5 years ago. Um, they were right on the edge of growing into their adulthood from that teenagehood era. And I felt like there was a great opportunity, not only for myself, but also for these passionate fans of these sports. And I think some other companies are catching up, recognizing the value. There are some competitors trying to get into some of these I'll say niche sports, but I'll just say they're underserved sports. I don't think they're niche because they have like tens of millions of diehard fans of these sports. They just haven't been prioritized by the traditional media. And so I think people are catching up, but when I recognize the value, the product market fit, it really got me super excited. Although I do not come from a sports background, I'm actually the only senior leadership member who doesn't come from a sports background. Obviously, after 3.5 years into the role, I feel fully plugged into the sports space. At the time, it wasn't my strength, but I it was so obvious that I felt like the urge just to jump into the opportunity. And one other thing that I just want to mention is as I was looking into the role, I was so surprised because at Amazon, people talk about, they define themselves as Amazonian, right? They very rarely care about which part of the Amazon business they plug into. That's not necessarily something that they feel pride with. As I talked to more and more people, part of Flow Sports, that was a very significant shift in that mindset, how people were feeling like this was part of who they are, how much ownership they felt with the brand, with the community. It was just something that I've never seen before that got me further excited about the role.
That's amazing. All right, I gotta ask, what is a sport that maybe you were introduced to or exposed to that you weren't previously before coming to Flow that has caught your interest or kind of excited you?
Yeah, this question comes up. There are a few of them. So we do cover over 25 sports from wrestling, grappling, hockey, grassroots racing, cheerleading, marching, cycling, rugby. The list goes on with a wide array of NCAA sports. There are two that I became actually huge fans. Number one, jiu-jitsu is one of them. I actually very recently started training in jiu-jitsu as well, along with my son. Who would
Wow.
have known? I didn't know that was a sport that existed at the
My
extent that
CRO
it
is
said.
like really into jujitsu. He told me all about it in the interview process, and I thought there was some level of discipline there that made me think that he'd be a great employee, and it turned out to be the case. So I
For
know a lot more about
For
jujitsu myself than
sure.
this.
I'm excited. I'm very new. Obviously, I'm just a beginner, and but I'm encouraging my son to get into it as well. He's only 5, but everything it represents, I'm just becoming a huge fan of it. Just after getting introduced to it 3.5 years ago. The second one is hockey. That is mostly because of my son. We do not talk hockey. We did not talk hockey in our household. Both myself and my husband are from Turkey. Soccer is really what we live and breathe. But my son started showing signs of hockey, like interest into hockey from a very early age. And we started looking more and more into it and spending more and more time into it. And now I became a huge AHL fan, which is one of the leagues that we cover here at FloSports, Flow Hockey. And so those are the two main like sports that I didn't know much about, but now I know everything, A to Z.
Fantastic, fantastic. I got to tell you, my 12-year-old daughter is like a high performance competition cheerleader.
Oh, wow.
Um, I'm just trying to figure out how I can get her a scholarship, maybe get her to be a professional. So can you guys just do me a favor and pump a lot of branding and content into the cheerleading space so that by the time that she's old enough that, I can retire because she's a millionaire because it's become like one
That
of the top professional sports?
anything for little daughter, anything.
Anything.
Sure.
I appreciate that. So listen, let's talk a little bit. Let's go back to the marketing. I'm interested and fascinated by this engineering aspect. Typically, when I thought of marketers growing up, I just think of these creatives and people that are putting together these great campaigns. And then, of course, like data and performance marketing and all that has become more to the forefront. It's become
Mhm.
much more analytical over the last 10 to 15 years. But I'm interested, the engineering background, like, has that helped? Has that given you a different perspective that maybe a more traditional marketeer wouldn't have had?
I would say so. That really goes back to, leaning into your strengths. So I would say one of my superpowers, this just happens to be after I spend a good amount of time in any business right now in the business reviews with my team and whatnot. When I look into the data, like it takes me often 30 seconds to a minute to really absorb, okay, what's happening in that data set. And obviously, I should do a shout out to the Amazon culture because you live and breathe in data and how you operate on your day to day. Any marketing function that's just embedded to who you are. Some of it comes from that Amazonian culture, but also, just from a skill set perspective, that just happens to be a strength. It's my superpower. When I look into a table, I can recognize 3 things that might be wrong with that data set, which is really coming from my instincts to tie every input to the output. I'm very process oriented, I would say. So when I think about marketers in a broad spectrum, I feel like one end of the spectrum, these creatively driven, brilliant storytellers, and on the other end of the spectrum, these process obsessed input versus output focused growth hackers. I grew up to be that growth hacker, but obviously over the course of my career path, it pushes you somewhere in the middle of that spectrum where I always said brand in, because how you approach the brand could be fairly analytically driven or creatively driven. The fact is that I will always lean on to the analytical side of that spectrum, but that's the beauty of marketing. You bring in people to close those gaps. I hire people who are more creative than I am and who are better storyteller than I am. But I tend to have a really strong sense of the ins and outs of the business, so I can ask all the right questions at the right time. to make sure that that creativity feeds into the broader flywheel in the most efficient, effective way possible. So that's been working out well so far.
Love that. One of the things that I found a few years ago was how to communicate like an Amazonian. Then obviously data was a big part of that, and being very data driven in your meetings. And the bar raiser that they bring into interviews for Amazon is
Mhm.
something into our software technology. The pizza rule. There's just so many things that have come out of Amazon that have become corporate lore, and have become things that other companies have looked at and tried to emulate and tried to replicate.
Mhm.
Looking at Amazon, looking at Match.com, both of those companies really interest me. What were some major lessons or takeaways from you that have informed who you are as an executive and as a leader going forward?
Yeah. On the Amazon side, I'll just say it's a very humbling experience to be part of such a huge company. The type of problems that you deal with, it's guaranteed those problems have been tackled by someone smarter than you before. So the sense of, looking for mental model, building those mental models, frameworks, being obsessed with that. So whatever solution you're coming up with can be repetitive, right? Like in the future for the problems to come. I think that's been the biggest learning, not just to solve for the moment, but solve for the long term, and know that there's always some kind of like documentation or solution that you might be looking for that might have happened from people coming ahead of you. I always will be also always grateful for the kind of like coaching that I received with the leadership I had at Amazon. So really will be always grateful. On the Mesh.com side, really same thing I would say. As I, started working at Match, I had a fairly junior role, which then quickly grew into a director level role. And then I made the transition to the educational space. At the time, Match.com acquired the Princeton Review, which is a test prep company. So the old CEO of Match.com moved into leading the online education space for the IAC group. Mandy Ginsburg was her name at the time. And then kind of like her president slash chief product officer, Shar. And they've been amazing mentors for me, if anything. Because of that transition, they really looked for growing the business on the online side of Princeton Review as quickly as possible because they knew the brick and mortar piece of Princeton Review was very um, complex and did not show a lot of growth opportunities. So they've seen the growth was going to be happening on the digital side of the business, which triggered them to kind of like move me from the math side to focus on the online education space. That gave me great amount of exposure, working directly with those amazing leaders who are now like holding really strong, powerful seats elsewhere. So I would say having direct access to that kind of leadership very early on at the director level at my career pad was very invaluable and has taught me almost like in a crash course style, a lot of things. Because especially when you're coming from, performance marketing, these analytical spaces, you have a tendency to be super dialed into the details. It sometimes gets very challenging to take 5 steps back and look into the broader picture because you're into that day to day very, very closely. And they kind of like led me into that, growing into that next step of, okay, what's the bigger picture and how what I'm doing here is really translating into the broader business results. That was one thing that I'll always be grateful for Manny and Shar for their contribution in that sense.
Yeah, I don't think I knew that Match.com acquired Princeton Review like that.
Yeah.
And was it just like a good business that they couldn't pass up, or was there some sort of like adjacency or technology play? Or
Well,
like,
the hypothesis was they already had the tutor.com, and the hypothesis was that with online dating, it's matching people based on their qualifications, right? They had all the data of all the singles. They felt like matching a tutor with a student was going to be very similar in nature, like matching couples. They felt like there could be an overlap there, and they wanted to build on top of that tutor.com. I will say quite shortly, they recognized that especially the brick and mortar piece of Princeton Review was not something that they wanted to tackle. So while they've grown the digital side of things very meaningfully, they ended up handing over the test prep. And I would assume Tutor.com as well. They ended up selling it after growing it because they didn't actually see the same kind of like overlap they anticipated they would with the online dating space and just double down on online dating. Mhm.
I used to say when I first, so I built software 3 years ago and started taking it to market over the past 6 months around hiring. And really the way when I used to tell people about it back in 2013, 14, when I first started conceptualizing an idea was, I'm going to bring up a competitor, the eHarmony of the job marketplace, right? How do we take
Yeah.
some of the same kind of algos and knowledge of dating and bring that to matching a job in a company and bring that together? Because I feel like there's a lot of
Mhm.
synergy there, very big differences too. So, wow, I find that to be so fascinating about the acquisition and the way they went with that. And obviously that was such a formative time in your career. So I really appreciate you sharing that. We got to top talent here because at the end of the day, we love talking about how you build teams and how you hire. It's something I'm obsessed with. So I want to start here. You've worked at, a company that's very well known for a very rigorous intellectual hiring process. You're working in a high growth environment like FloSports. So I'm just interested. Let's start here. What's a core hiring philosophy that has followed you from job to job? Something that you believe deeply when bringing anybody onto your team that's important to you.
There are really two, I will say, principles that I follow religiously. Number one is earn trust. Any candidate that I talk to, I try to establish a certain level of trusted relationship within that conversation. And if I can not feel that, that's a huge red flag for me. The second piece is ownership. In the conversation, I always look for cues. Within the answers that they are providing for any given question, whether they take credit for others' accomplishments and how they kind of like visualize their contribution to any project. If they talk a lot of, we did this kind of language to I did this and try to understand whether they take full ownership of their domain for whatever role they're interviewing at any given time.
Finding the right talent for your team doesn't have to be a struggle. Meet Aon Hire, the world's first hiring experience management platform designed to transform the way you hire. Powered by AI, Aon Hire takes the hassle out of every step in the process. From smart resume analysis to customized interview questions, it saves you time, money, and effort. Plus, with real-time insights from every interview, you can quickly identify top candidates, reduce turnover, and stay on budget. And forget about note-taking, Aon Hire takes care of that for you. Ready to revolutionize your hiring process? Visit aonhire.com and get started today.
Okay. I like that. Those are really good tips to keep an eye on and then understand if you're bringing in a team player or maybe somebody who has a little bit more of an individualistic mindset. What about a memorable interview experience? Maybe it was when you were interviewing or maybe you were interviewing somebody. You don't got to name names, but what comes
Yeah.
to mind about that?
I'm gonna actually give the example from my very first interview after I moved to the United States. So that was several years ago. Uh, and it was a very challenging time, I would say, for myself. It was not only a career shock, but had a lot of difficult. I had a difficult time explaining myself why someone who studied engineering wanted to, work in the marketing field. While it's very common practice in Europe, also in Turkey, it just wasn't at the time when I moved to the U.S. I will say. So my one of my very first interviews and definitely my first in-person interview was at this investment bank for a marketing analytics role. I think they felt like, engineering and, she wants to do marketing, maybe marketing analytics. And I did a good job on the phone interview. And my one-on-one interview was with like a older gentleman at this company. I'm not gonna name it, but it's a very well-known investment bank. And he had a very difficult time, making sense of what I was saying, and he hung up on my accent a lot, and I felt horrible, and I like a flip switched, and I shut down. I remember freezing. It was the worst experience of my life, but because of that experience, I religiously worked in front of the mirror, like practicing my interview skill set after that interview. Now I know, like, I'm actually now I'm being super well prepared for whatever, I'm doing, whether it's a presentation, an interview, whatever that might be. That that experience has been a defining factor of who I am today. I just wasn't, prepared enough, apparently. And I'll never forget that experience. But I'm better because of that.
I could tell a lot about your accountability that you took that and you used it to make yourself better. Others might have looked at it a different way. I just got to say to the guy at the investment bank, like creating an inclusive, hiring experience and doing your best to kind of fight through those things and understand what's behind, the mind and then the heart of somebody is kind of of the job. So I'm not sure how he handled it, if he was polite about it or if he was abrasive about it. It sounds like your takeaway was that you needed to improve in this area. But I got to imagine that was that made it tough in terms of wanting to work at that place too, because that's, you did a great phone interview and then you got into another interview.
Yeah,
It had to have been something I thought he could have probably adapted better to. Is that fair?
it's fair. I'll admit that. It's fair.
And now look, they lost out on you and you went on to Amazon. You went on to be the chief marketing officer of FloSports. That is their loss. What about a favorite question? What's the favorite question that you love to ask in an interview?
I always ask, I often start with this. Like, I ask people for an accomplishment of theirs that they feel the most proud about, ideally something that directly translates into the role that they would be hired for two reasons. Number one, it often gives me a sense of their think big, meaning what they define as success. So if I'm hiring for a manager versus a VP, the kind of examples that I would like them to define as their most proud moment obviously varies. And at the VP level, I'm looking for something bigger versus, at the director or senior manager level, that might look a little differently. So it gives me a really good sense of, what think big means for them or what accomplishment means for them. The second piece is, again, as I ask them more about their accomplishment and their contribution in delivering that, it often gives me a good sense of their specific contribution and how they were involved and how they managed the process and so on and so forth. So um, it opens up the conversation from there, and I, as we would say, like peel the onion, ask more and more detailed questions to get to the bottom of it. Some people are more forthcoming, some of them are not. That also gives you a sense to their communication style, how much they're willing to talk, and how much willing they are to share. So that's kind of like a good starting point often.
I like that question. It's really good. What about when you miss on somebody? Because we've all mishired before. It's just part of the game, right? And obviously, as we grow in our career and we learn and we mature and kind of learn what works and what doesn't, we might start to kind of figure it out. But I'm interested, is there a theme? Is it maybe early on in your career you were doing this, or maybe even something that recently you were realizing that was a blocker or a bias for you? What comes to mind when I ask you about that in terms of hiring?
Um, this often goes back to the earned trust piece. I would say there's been times where people are very well prepared, right? Like, especially this would happen at Amazon, and I was trained to be a bar raiser as well. When you have the list of questions online, anyone can pretty much get access to them, and they have their examples prepared and so on and so forth. And you're particularly trained not to bring your emotions and feelings to the process. You want everything to be factual based on the examples that they're giving you. When you try to kind of like translate it into my now flow experience, and that's what we did at Amazon, right? Like, but I carried a lot of those learnings to flow here, to my hiring process as well. Sometimes, someone, a candidate, might be giving you all the right answers and they're very well prepared, and I truly respect them for preparing. But in your heart, you have this gut feeling something is just not quite right. And I've had that happen to me before. Sometimes I like, okay, like what more are you looking? Like, you've been looking for this person for X many months and this person gave you all the right answers. Just try to silence that, gut feeling. I've done that before. And later on, it came and bit me in the back. I will just say that
Yeah.
happened. I learned not to ignore that feeling for sure.
Yeah, a couple of different things there. So I always talk about how sales can be one of the most difficult things to hire for, because naturally, if somebody is good at selling, they're going to be in that meeting and you might get sold a bill of goods that might not be actually what you're getting. Conversely, marketing, a similar thing. You have to think
Yeah.
that they know how to position themselves and to brand themselves in a way that's appealing. And sometimes not all that glitters is gold. And maybe you're not getting that when the person actually starts. I would tell you that what I've learned is that our gut instincts, to your point, are usually right. But what most people call a gut instinct and just say it's something I feel, what I try to do is I try to codify that in my mind, right? Why do I feel this way? What experience is this reminding me of? Is this something I read about? Is this something I've hired in the past and had a mistake? Like, how can I kind of codify that in a way where I can put words to it? Because what happens is when you go into one of the things about an interview, especially if you're with 3, 4, or 5 different people who are interviewing, right? And you're expected to kind of give your feedback on something. Like, there's just something that doesn't feel right.
Yeah.
By nature, I think people are gonna be like, well, kind of hard to quantify that or make that tangible, right? So I've always tried to codify that and articulate that, not always to success, but where is this feeling coming from? Why am I feeling this? Is it from a previous experience? Is that my own bias? Or more likely, is that something that I've had a bad experience with and I want to make sure that I stay out in front of? Because that's usually what's happening. You have like a red signal in your head blaring and saying, this has come up before.
Yeah.
You want to, right?
There is one question that I always go to when I have this feeling. And sometimes this became actually like after a certain point, I ended up asking this, like whether I have any signal or not. I started bringing up this question. Can you share with me the most recent piece of critical feedback that you felt like it was fair? Can you share with me a critical piece of feedback that you felt like it wasn't fair, and why? And what did you do about it? And it often gives you a sense of like their likelihood to be forthcoming and open. That gut feeling often, stung for me when, I had flags from an non-trust perspective, but now I started asking these questions from the get-go, pretty much just so that we level set. And if there are no red flags, we just keep going. But yeah, that question also helped with me, but totally, I hear you as well. Those feelings are not to be ignored.
Yeah, I mean, listen, here's what we'll tell people that are listening. They're wanting to sharpen their interview game or their question game. Let's say what a bad question is. A bad question is, tell us your biggest weakness, right? Because you're obviously going to get some sort of, manufactured answer that somehow it's actually something that's good that they perceive the weakness. But what you said in terms of what's the last bit of critical feedback you've given that you agreed with, another way that I like to frame it is, tell me about something that in this role you want to develop and get better at. Because a lot of times then you're going to get a sense of what they might consider a weakness or areas that they see as opportunities to grow. And it's a less direct way of finding out what are their areas of opportunity. But I really like yours too. So I think that's great. I'm going to go in a little bit of a different direction here because I have brought up the term of the bar raiser so much. Our software, Aon, actually does this in terms of our AI analyzing kind of third party and the requirements. Can you tell our listeners a little bit about what it means to become a bar raiser and what the concept is in the Amazon interview process?
It's often someone that is not within the organization that you're hiring for. So there are less to none biases. That's to prevent, the hiring manager to have any sort of bias. They are tasked to ask the most challenging questions within the hiring process to the interviewers. They kind of like hold a meeting ahead of the interview and then after the interview process to kind of like organize and manage the conversation. They challenge the hiring manager to get more curious, to look at things from different angles and overcome their biases. So it's definitely something that is being
That
used
sounds like a
to
premium.
elevate
It
the
sounds like
hiring
something you have to
process.
earn, right? It's something that like
Oh,
you have to show that you have this capability and this competency to be able to do this. And then only over time are you labeled a bar raiser and brought into the
yeah.
interview process.
There,
Okay.
there's a certain amount of interviews you have to complete to be eligible, and then you get into a training process where you are assigned a coach. Then you do the trainee, and then you're the trainee, and then you graduate to be a bar raiser and actually manage those conversations as well.
I mean, listen, I love it when companies take a unique approach to interviewing and they take it seriously and they look at it as a privilege rather than a right. And I do love the idea of bringing somebody in from outside the team that maybe doesn't have the same dependencies or priorities, or like, oh my God, I want to, like, this is going to take work off my plate, so I just want to hire this role or whatever it may be. You're getting somebody that understands the company, understands the culture, and is actually going to hold everybody to a litmus test or a line that allows only the best people to get into the organization. When I was talking about our software, the reason that we call, our interview assessment the bar raisers, because the AI asks you to draw out requirements at the beginning of the position. What's important? What defines success in this role? And then we're most lucid at that time. And then what happens during an interview process is we start to get caught up in timelines or rose-colored glasses or biases and start to forget about what the key things are that actually make a successful hire. And so then thus our AI is analyzing things strictly based on those requirements. And that's why we look at it as a way to challenge the hiring manager, challenge the interview team on what they're seeing. So I love that. That's where the concept came from. Thank you for explaining it. Maybe people had heard me bring it up before and didn't know what it was. That's amazing. All right. I want to ask you a couple other questions. Let's talk about AI, because AI is at the tip of everybody's tongue. You live in Austin. It's a great, thriving technical community. Obviously, there's a lot of AI startups out there. How are you leveraging AI at Flow or maybe into marketing? What are you seeing from that perspective?
Yeah, I'm really proud of the progress that Flow has made actually just within this year. First of all, I'll just say AI is now going to be one of our top priorities for 2026. This year in 2025, we actually hired a VP of AI operations to help train our employees on how to best utilize AI. Not only from a gaining efficiencies perspective, but we look at it in a more holistic manner in the sense that there are different categories of AI operators to be built. Some of them just as easy as utilizing ChatGPT. Some of them maybe creating our custom ChatGPT specific cases built within that AI operator, and the third case like custom built AI operators. Just categorizing the needs, just starting asking the right questions in the sense that where we can utilize AI in the best way possible as it relates to our day to day. We are ahead of the game, in my opinion, in comparison to many other streaming businesses in that sense. We already started going through the exercises in the sense that, how can we utilize X, Y, and Z to get better in 2026? Our co-founder CEO Mark always talks about it as, an Iron Man suit that like all employees should be wearing. It genuinely gives you a superpower to get more efficient and effective. For marketing specifically, there are very specific cases where I started using AI for. So a good example to that would be all the persona work that's been built. We started kind of like feeding it into the custom AI operator that we built, along with our CSAT analysis, the NPS scores, like all the feedback that we're collecting from our customer base. Because if you think about it, as I said, we have 25 sports. Some of them are fan-driven, some of them are participatory, some of them are a mixed bag of fan and participatory. If they're participatory, we have the athletes, we have the, friends and families and everything that comes with it. When you look at that metrics with all those different kind of personas, like as you can imagine, a cheerleading audience is very different than my racing audience, very different than the hockey audience. It gets very complex. And then you add the layer of the seasonalities where all these seasons, depending on where you are at any given sport at any given time, the kind of like conversations that you want to have needs to be different. AI has been a huge unlock for us to kind of like identify what that might look like at scale and do it in a much more efficient way. But also this AI operator that I was telling you about, that's fed with the persona work and all the analysis that we have around our customers. We started utilizing it as like a sounding board for any messaging strategy, any season launch, campaign planning. We started plugging that into the AI operator to tell us, once that's trained, of course, to tell us where we might have gaps, depending on the time of the year, depending on who you're trying to talk to at any given time, whether we're, covering all of our bases to further level up our communication. I think it's been also very helpful from a life cycle CRM perspective as well. From a personalization perspective, based on the customer's behavior, as I said, fan-driven events are different than the participatory events and all these leagues and, you know, conferences and whatever kind like information we have around the customers. We want to make sure that they are served with the most customized and personalized experience. So AI has been absolutely helpful in all those fronts so far.
Sounds like an exciting time to be at Flow. You all are really adapting and taking AI to heart. It sounds like it's such a
Sure.
big part of this. I love that.
Yeah.
All right. What is a book that you've read recently that you might recommend to some of our listeners? Anything come to mind?
This is not a book I read recently, but I live by this book. I just wanna share with everyone. I was introduced to this book with one of my leaders at Amazon, and it's called The 15 Commitments of Conscious Leadership.
Mm.
This book ended up my go-to for many reasons. When people ask me, help me understand what's your style of operations and management style, I always refer them to this book. I gift this book to every new employee that joins to my team as well. I think
Love
it's a
that.
great way to kind of like summarize what I prioritize. It talks a lot about taking ownership, this victim, villain, and hero triangle, and I really cannot stand to drama. So that this book really talks to how to avoid that, eliminating gossip, taking ownership, responsibility. So I definitely recommend the book to anyone who might not have read it by now.
15 Commitments of Conscious Leadership.
Mhm.
We're all anti-drama podcast, so we can appreciate that. I'm going to have to pick that one up and take a
Sounds
look at it.
good. You would love that.
I'm going to check it out. I love the read. I am going to give you one last question, then we're going to go to our speed round.
Okay.
I want to know what's some advice that you would give 20-year-old Ozge that you didn't know then, but that you know now?
I sometimes think about this. This question comes up when I chat sometimes with my best friends from college as well. Um, I feel like I would tell her not to work as hard because I did not take any time off. I spent all my summers in college doing internships, moving one internship to another. But then I reflect back to where I am. Probably there's a good reason I am where I am. As soon as I've been, um, I have to take to that 20-year-old version of myself as well. So it's like a double-edged sword. Probably there's a good reason, that ambitious woman who didn't take no for an answer. Like that's the reason I am who I
Pressing
am
nerves.
today. But
Yeah.
she could have still taken it a little slower because, work never ends and we'll work for until, we see the end of our day. So she could have also, had some more fun while she was in college, while she could.
It's an infinite hole that can be filled with work. And to your point, there has
Yeah.
to be a combination of ambition and fulfillment, right? If you
Yeah.
are just constantly chasing and moving on to the next thing, you're going to look back one day and you're going to realize I didn't live a fulfilled life. I pursued work and that's great. And it's gotten me money or it's gotten me title. It's gotten me responsibility. But what do we want all those things for? We want them so that we have an ability to enjoy our life. And college is such a formative time. I got to be honest, I probably would take the opposite advice. I wish 20-year-old Oz might have put a bit more on his academics than otherwise than trying to develop somewhere socially. But to your point, all these things make up who we are and the
Yeah.
path that we and how we came to be who we are, right?
There are no right or wrong answers. They are just part of who we are today.
100%. All right, here we go. We're going to get to our world famous
Mhm.
speed round. You do not know these questions, but I'm going to ask you about some of the places that you've lived because I want to get some insights. And really, I really ask these things just so I know where to go eat if I visit your city. So
Sure.
we'll start here. Are you a barbecue fan now that you moved to Austin?
I would say so. Yeah.
What's your go-to order?
Beef ribs.
Beef ribs. Okay. Does not have to be barbecue, but in Austin, what is your favorite restaurant?
That would need to be my hometown back in Turkey, a city called Adana. That's the city where kebab was invented, believe it or not. So I'm a huge kebab fan. and that would be my hometown, like a restaurant in my hometown. I will not try to torture you with the name, but that the food is at the top of the list. Like I sometimes debate family food. They get really
Mm.
close to what I miss
I
sometimes.
like to combine both of them, but I'm with you. Now, I was going to go to Turkey next, but I got to ask this sporting event in Austin. What's your favorite to attend?
It will be either the Who's Number One series we often host in the city, jiu-jitsu events. If that's not the case, I would say AHL Texas Star games that we now go to every now and then because now we are fans.
Let's get the NHL in Austin. My God, they got a team in Dallas. They can do
I
it in
know.
Austin. All right. If I'm taking a 2-day trip to Turkey, where you,
It has to be Istanbul. And 2 days won't be enough. I probably will pack your schedule with a series of things. But with that traffic, good luck. Probably you won't get to see half of it in 2 days.
oh, jeez, I got to extend my trip. This
Yes.
hypothetical trip, I'm already feeling stressed out about it.
I know. That's the way we
What's your
roll.
favorite traditional Turkish meal?
Adana kebab. Yeah, for sure.
Kebab. Okay.
Yeah.
So the kebab was invented in Turkey, is what you're
In
telling me.
my hometown, like the certain type, the one that is in a skewer and is grilled on coal. Yeah, that's the one.
Love it.
That's
I love a good Turkish tea louse too, right? My mom loves watching Turkish soap operas and loves going to Turkish tea houses. So I probably do have to get to Istanbul with her and maybe make it a little bit of a
you would
longer
love
trip.
that. Yeah, she would love that, I'm sure.
Last question. It's actually about Milan, where you studied. What was your favorite thing about living in that city?
Aperitivos, of course. You don't have to pay for the food. You just grab a glass of wine or whatever, and food comes with it, and you just hang out and chat with people that you've never met before. And it's such a social and warm environment to experience the city. I used to love it.
I love that. So you just grab a wine and they bring you like nice little
so aperitivos.
type foods.
Yeah.
Okay.
They're served as a part of it. Nothing fulfilling in the way that, you would not be feeling full up here, but it would be enough and get the conversation going. And it's a great social environment to chit chat and meet with new people.
I love that. Well, we should have known that you get Oz together, you get Ozge together, that we're going to make magic. It's going to be a great conversation. I so appreciate you coming on the show. Learned a lot. I appreciate you taking some time with us. I'm going to be looking forward to following Flo and the marketing over there, but also your burgeoning jiu-jitsu career.
Okay, I'll do my best. I'll try not to disappoint you guys.
Who's number
Thank you.
one? We're going to see you competing in
Oh
a
my
pretty.
goodness, not even close.
Ozge, thanks so much for coming on. Thanks again.
Thank you for the time. I appreciate it. Have a great day.